All right, apologize to those of you waiting online, viewing live. The board had some other business to tend to that ran a little bit over, but we're now calling our public session to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? If not, we'll open up for our first session of public comments. We don't have anybody in the room, so we'll open up to the online audience. Please raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. Being mindful of our policy that's now displayed. Another few seconds. If you see a hand raised, let me know, but guess we'll move on to Jade and the student representative report.
All right. So for tonight's report, went a little fancy. I just wanted to make my sort of brand and like what I'm doing more cohesive and more aesthetically apparent. So first update. I know that it's been a frequent question of how seniors are doing with college acceptances and getting out there. So here are the on the the accepted on the spot numbers. 4 colleges have participated already, and there are 2 more that we know of on the books. I'm sure there'll be more in addition. Southern New Hampshire's coming up, and I hear that there's a big number anticipated in attendance for that, and Mount Wachusett will be following. And then there's the numbers for Apply New Hampshire. I know that we were kind of discussing that previously as well. It's looking really great, seeing how ambitious this class is. Let's just say so for myself.
How many students are there in your grade?
Yeah.
Or seniors? How many seniors are there?
I believe it's somewhere between 80 and 89.
It's almost 100% that apply.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Incredible. Right before the Thanksgiving break, we had a Spirit Week for CMHS. Just a 2-day thing. We had Twin Day and Sweater/Flannel Day. It was a really good participation rate. I wasn't able to receive the images of like the big groups, but for what I did have, I wanted to include some pictures, just to liven it up, kind of put an image to what I've been saying. So that's exciting. And then recently we also hosted a food drive for the Thanksgiving time. It was the 2 student councils, the both middle and high school, in collaboration working to receive and give as many food donations to Jaffrey and Rindge food banks. There's numbers. Middle school participation was insanely high. It was great to see middle schoolers getting involved, high schoolers as well, but obviously the middle school really conquered this event. And the mentoring group with the most donations was rewarded with a pizza party, and I am a little bit jealous. But it's really great to see all that participation and willing to give as much as you can. And then we have winter athletics. We are entering the winter season. It is official now. Sign up on Family ID if you haven't already. Mr. Dustin had recently sent out a school-wide email just giving updates about especially the Pratt and how excited the athletic team is to be able to utilize the gym and have it be more community oriented with how the repainting has gone, as well as the cleaning and rehanging of the banners showcasing our school's achievements in athletics. He also focused on sportsmanship and new rules and regulations from NHIAA and all that stuff. But it's going to be brought up at the winter sports meetings, which will be taking place soon. The high school one will be at the end of this week.
Which are mandatory.
Which are mandatory. And if you do not attend, you will have to attend an exclusive one with Mrs. Lindstedt herself. And then the middle school will be having more intimate meetings just with their coach and their teams and their parents. Parents do have to go, which I do like that rule, because it helps with parental involvement, especially for those who are dependent on rides, like our middle schoolers and underclassmen in the high school. Next, Poetry Out Loud coming up. We have the high school English classes have been doing this for a few years now, and we're gearing up to compete for the school-wide competition, and then the regionals, and then the states, and then hopefully the nationals. We've had some national, we've had some people get to nationals from our school in the last few years. I know Ella Weinman did a few years ago, so it's really exciting to see how somebody from Jaffrey or Orange can go to DC and compete. But it's a really great program to teach public speaking, memorization, recitation, and it helps a class become more assured of themselves, as well as grow more of a community aspect with their class. It really bonds a class together. I know that in my English class, AP Literature and Composition, it's allowed us to not be afraid of each other anymore. It's really nice. And then
Be comfortable with each
be
other.
comfortable with each other, absolutely. The National Junior Honor Society has become a chapter here at Icona Middle High School. It's to celebrate academic achievements and to give you extra preparation, especially if at some point in their upperclassmanship in high school, they would like to be a part of the high school level National Honor Society. It's a great opportunity. And we as National Honor Society members are helping them. We are kind of providing the framework. I know that some National Honor Society members are going to the induction to kind of help out, show them the ropes a little bit. It's a really nice thing. And then lastly, I will be attending a conference in Concord this weekend. It's for student representatives all throughout New Hampshire. And I'm very excited for the topics that will be addressed and how I can personally improve and really just get the gist of what's going on, you know? You can see the listed topics addressed. And that's about all I have for you.
Nice job.
Yeah,
Very nice.
thank you. You did a really nice job with that, Jada, and I
Thank
think
you.
the look of it and everything is excellent, but I think the information was probably even better.
Oh,
I know you haven't been around previously, but we used to start the meetings kind of going through like the upcoming calendar and things like that, and have debated on that going back and forth. And I think one of the weaknesses that we had when we go through it was we didn't really know much about the events, right? We'd look at the calendar and be like, oh, this is an event coming up, and maybe, you know, we didn't have the right people here. So I think it definitely helps to have that that perspective.
mhm. Thank you.
Any questions for Jaden? Thank you very much. I think that's all very good stuff. Appreciate it. I'm interested in hearing how the student conference goes.
I am too. I'm very excited.
So it'll be a good event, and a good chance for you to meet with other individuals. So
Yeah.
good for you for taking advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
Just tell them you're part of the school board of the year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll wear a badge.
All right, we're gonna move to Ruben now and the superintendent's report.
Okay, short superintendent's report tonight in that we, after the last meeting that we had a couple, pretty sizable events. First and foremost, we have the CTE presentation here with our architects and so forth. We had about 50 individuals from the community come and review that, ask questions. We, from there, already started to work with internally to find out what our road show in a sense is going to be. So utilizing some of the slides, some of the videos, our architects are going to actually make about a 3-minute video that is going to not just show the 3-dimensional renderings that we saw at the meeting, but also just kind of where we've been and what the whole structure is going to likely look like, but also what voters can expect. So it's going to be a tool to be able to share and communicate with voters. So we've identified some groups that we need to go and speak to, and also a couple of means to communicate in different ways to groups and individuals. So that there's some work that to be done. We also before Thanksgiving, but last Saturday prior to that, we had our meeting of the school board to look over budget and to have conversations there. So we had some conversation about the school budget, where we were at with the default budget, why the default budget was what it was, which is we'll be having further conversation tonight about that. And then what the difference is between the proposed budget and the default budget. Conversations were had about what reducing the proposed budget might entail. Obviously not wanting, or the default budget is based upon what's legally required to have within our budget. To make sure that we have the right personnel for student services, to make sure that we have the right placements for those who need it in different educational settings that they might need different from this setting. Also, it brings in all of the finances that deal with bargaining units contracts that have been approved by the voters in the past. And so all of that coming together, and then of course, how does that compare with the proposed budget? We discussed a little bit about the impact during that time frame of to RING taxes from this past budget cycle, and also the board's decision to return money back to taxpayers and what that all looked like. And that seemed relatively favorable from the school standpoint at the time. And I still don't believe we have the information yet, but at the time, Jaffrey had not put their tax rates out yet. So those of you who are from
Friday.
this coming Friday.
Mhm.
So we'll find out more this coming Friday as to what that decision did for the town of Jaffrey. We discussed during that time frame again the CTE conversation and putting forth a bond for renovation or new construction, really, for that purpose, and doing that simultaneously to having a budget and a default budget that's fairly high. I think about 6% higher, 5 to 6% higher than last year's budget. So lots of things to consider when trying to make, the board has some difficult conversations to still have, and some decisions to make as to how to move forward with budgeting for the following year, and what we're going to be putting on the warrant in the next month for the purpose of voting on the lunch. We had a couple days that Jaden, you talked about the mini Spirit Week over here. Elementary schools both had events where individuals were able to go to the schools and they have their kind of Thanksgiving meals. I know that it happened here as well. SAU was able to get involved with that, so that was nice. We had the 3 days of time off. I hope that everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving that was relaxing, that was restful. And we're in it for the next couple of weeks. I think that these next couple of weeks are pretty heavy as it leads up to the next holiday season. Or we're in the holiday season, but the next break that we have, and we'll have a couple of weeks off during that time for students anyway, and teachers as well. That is. Are we good?
Thank you, Ruben. Any questions or comments for Ruben on his report? Go ahead, John.
So thank you for the report, keeping it short. Just thinking about the CTE and the work that you've outlined to do communication. I know this time of year becomes pretty full with holidays and school vacations, and the time seems to rush by pretty quickly. So just wonder if you have any thoughts about timing on some of the meetings that you hope to have. Is early January where you're looking, or?
I think we'd like to have some, if possible, at least 1 or 2 in December. But certainly early January is likely to go in January, February, are going to be timeframes we can find the people available.
When is our deliberative session? I know I've got it in my book, but
February 5th.
it's the 5th, yeah. Okay,
Well, it's an opportunity during that time frame to also, present some, I mean, we're going to anyway, warrant,
sure.
but provide some deeper information on that.
Well, this budget process is certainly very important, but thank for all the work that you've done on getting prepared for the CTE.
Well, and I know I have an update today that came in just a short time ago. So as to firmer budget numbers for the warrant article.
Staying on the CTE topic, I know that we had the video and a presentation. What are your thoughts around, the releasing some of that information? Are we waiting for kind of a cleaned up version from the architect, something that'd be more suitable and tell the whole story? Or what are your thoughts around that as far as like?
The video of the presentation
Yeah.
itself and the presentation
Yeah.
are going to be put online.
Okay.
In that spot. The 3D rendering.
Yeah.
We want to put on social media. We might have to get a different version from the architects. But that was a conversation we had, I think Monday or Tuesday of last week with my office staff over in the SAU as to our next step. So I know that that's planned. Hopefully this week, actually. That'll all be uploaded.
Yeah, because I think that we had some I think it was a good meeting. Overall, the feedback was really good, but I think there's a lot of questions in order to, not let too much time go past to keep it on people's minds, kind of. We certainly don't want to overwhelm them. I think it's actually been kind of maybe a little bit good that we didn't release it all right away,
Right.
but we don't want people to forget about it as well. And so to get that out would be good.
Sure.
Anything else for the superintendent report? I will just say I'd been meaning to, since we announced the new food service, I'd had on my list, one thing to do would be like go have a meal in one of the cafeterias, and I had over the past 2 years hadn't done that, but was able to go for the Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah.
And actually didn't intend on eating. I was
Which
just gonna,
school?
at RMS.
RMS, okay.
Yeah, I went to volunteer and I was just gonna serve some, but I say the staff did a great job of organizing it. The staff, both the cafeteria staff and the school staff, it was a great event, and I definitely couldn't, the food looked really good and I had to have my meal and maybe some of my daughters too. So I was impressed and glad to kind of check that box. I think that it's been a big improvement for the schools having that food service program. Really was good. Anyways, just thought I'd mention that.
just want to note that, you know, they ate his food and it was so good that he may have taken it away from his daughter as well.
I was hungry that day.
She turned to talk to someone, it was gone.
All right, anything else for Ruben? If not, I know we have a lot to talk about, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tonight we have manifests, a budget transfer of $100,000 to cover tuition, private, other schools, and the updated stipend lists.
So what's transfer, where's it coming from and going to?
You have that transfer with you right now?
No.
No. It's coming from, I can get this information. Coming from the special ed lines, I believe, from tuition from other schools to different locations, to a different line for this private other schools. That tends to be what happens. Let me just make sure. I think you need to have an answer, so let me just get that information for you. It might take a little bit of time.
Okay.
So I can find out.
I'll make a motion to remove the budget transfer from the consent agenda pending this new information.
I'll second.
All right. Do we vote on that? To remove it from the agenda? Yeah.
Sure.
All those in favor of removing it from the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so we'll remove the budget transfer from the consent agenda for the time being.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you, Lisa.
Second,
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions or comments? We'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the amended consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed and abstentions? So that is passed. 6-0. We will move on to the approval of the November 4th meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the November 4th meeting minutes.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor of approving the November 4th meeting minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
aye,
All those opposed and abstentions? Those are approved by a vote of 6-0.
Are we gonna have the November 18th ones, or is that just an oversight?
You're coming.
Okay.
Looks like we don't have any. Make sure I have the right version
I
of
knew
it.
it. Where'd that come from?
Okay, this is the latest. Got it. We do have a request to waive facility fees for Ringe Recreation Department. They'll pick up basketball at the RMS gym for January into February. I think that's an ongoing program, just continuing.
A motion to accept the waiver of the facility fees for the Ridge Rec Department for the dates listed.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. Questions or discussion? We'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the request to waive facility fees, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed and abstentions? That passes by a vote of 6-0. And we'll move to action items. Taking a look at these, yes, they are kind of in order, but I think I'd like to start with the educational field trip to Old Sturbridge Village. This is for an RMS field trip to Old Sturbridge Village. What's the dates? Trip date? It's June 6th. So it's towards the end of the
Week
year.
Before school ends?
It's getting close. Somebody could make a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the field trip.
Thank you, Kim.
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor of approving the field trip to Old Sturbridge Village, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed and abstentions. That passes by a vote of 6 to 0 to 0. So the other item that we have for action items is our meatiest item as a board, certainly. We've had a few meetings and discussions on the budget. As Ruben said, looked at the default budget, looked at the proposed budget. We've had some discussions, so I think now that we've had some additional time, right, we've had a week. I wanted to, I guess, start this as a board by going around the table, just seeking comment from everybody. I think at the end of this, right, we need to have a budget that is owned and supported by the full board, hopefully. And now that we've had that additional time, I just wanted to get some views before we maybe get into some more detailed discussions, so we can be sure where we stand overall. I guess maybe I'll start down here with you, Sandy.
I've got some concerns about this budget. I just don't think, I just, in looking through it, I don't understand some of it. I don't understand some of these where we've had no expenses, but we've got these big encumbrances. And now we're saying we need that money, but we didn't spend that money this year. I guess I think we've got to get this budget down. I don't think it's gonna fly. And the CTC program, I think we're not gonna have both. We can't have this big budget and we can't have that. We've got to pare it down.
So when you mean, just for clarity, you mean the default budget as well as the proposed?
Well, to me, the default budget is the bottom line of the budget. I understand the default is a certain portion that you can't really touch and the rest of it you add to it. But the bottom line is the bottom line. We got to get that bottom line number down. Even though I know some of it is portions that we can't touch, we can't move, it's part of the contract, there are obligations, I understand that. So then we look at the other part and see what we can do there. In going through it, I mean, I'm looking at things and I just don't, I guess I don't understand. Either things are not where there's, like we've got, I don't get it. We got leases, we've budgeted 379,000. We haven't spent a dime. We've encumbered it, but we haven't spent a dime. Is that a one-time payment that's gonna come later, or are we never spending it? We just put it there because we might need it? It's due when? Okay, so then we'll see all that disappear. Okay. The other one, I mean, I'm just going down and some of it's nitpicking. It is gonna make a bit of difference. I look at the auditors. Do you have an audit once a year? Because it looks like there was money budgeted, there was money spent, but then there's money encumbered.
Do we want to have a, 1 second?
Yeah.
Do we need a microphone?
We had spoken about this. I think that. Yeah, I guess we can have a microphone, or you could come up to the table. I'll leave it up to you.
We have a microphone right over here.
You can just take your microphone. Because we can hear you just fine, but.
I just feel like some of these encumbrances are huge and we're not really going to need them all. So I don't really want to say, okay, well, that's what we need to budget for next year. If we're not going to spend that money. That's just my opinion. I'm concerned about the CTC. I'm concerned about that warrant article. I know Ruben was gonna talk about that, but I believe that we have to do the warrant article for the whole sum. And then the state will reimburse us year by year. So when you present it, I think you're gonna have to present it as we need to bond the 2.2 million. But we're gonna get money back, but it's gonna come in dribs by the year. And I hope it comes because the sewer thing, the town didn't get all the money they state said they'd give them. So I think those are my concerns. If you want that program to go, and I think it's important, I think we gotta get this budget down.
I do think that's the way it is with building aid in general, that what you described, I think CTE is a lump sum. But I can go back and find that out. My understanding was that it was not.
A yearly
It
payment.
was not a year. But we can go check. I'll check on that because now I'm questioning myself.
Right. For the town, that's the way it works. We have to bond the whole thing. And then they send us a payment every year. If they don't pay the interest, they only send the payment.
Yeah, that would certainly be, because it changes the whole picture, right? And I think that.
Yeah.
Given that, our plan is to submit the bond, the warrant article for, the 25% or so. The public would be concerned, right? If we don't get that money, we certainly wouldn't be on the hook for the whole thing. So I think that it has to be just the
Yeah.
25 to 30%. Okay, thank you, Sandy. Maybe we'll come back around to some of those, but I want to give
Okay.
everyone a chance. Lisa, do you have any,
A couple. One is, could we have, like, what is the difference at this point that we're asking in terms of the default? Because I thought what we had talked about was it was like right online with the default. Am I mistaken? Are we asking for a lot more than the default right now? Like, what's for what we
Proposed.
would agree to put on the warrant article as is? I thought what we had talked about was it was keeping right in line with it. Can't remember. Did we go way over that?
I thought the default was higher, much higher. No, it's not.
the default is about $1.92 million higher than the current budget, and then there's additional.
Right, but what we're asking, not the current budget, what we'd be asking for in the warrant article as
Which warrant article?
the one, like
Budget warrant article?
the budget warrant article, not
It's-
nothing
It's like,
after it.
it's like 2 to 2.6 million more than the current budget. Default being 2 million more,
So the default is more than what?
2 million more.
But you're saying current budget, I'm talking about proposed budget.
Proposed budget's higher than the default.
Right.
By like another 600,000 or so.
So we look at this
thank
number
you.
right here. 34,
Yeah.
914. That's the proposed. We'll go back to this one, so 34, 914 to the default. At that same spot. 34, 373. So the default's 6% higher than the current budget.
Mhm.
And you can see that there's about a $600,000 difference between
Okay. All
the
right,
default.
So the default goes up by like
34,373.
2 million to current, and then there's
Right.
an additional 600,000 on top of
I
that.
was just looking at that.
It's a little less, it's a little less, it's
$100,000.
like 575,000. roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That was one question. Another question I had was, I thought that we were gonna be talking about the items that didn't have to go in to the budget. I'm confused as to what we're kind of looking at tonight. Because my impression was that we were coming tonight to look at those items that we can make those decisions on. Is that coming after? Like, what are we doing tonight with this?
I think we need, my view of it, and we can decide that, is we need to agree on kind of directionally where we want to go as budget. Right now, we have $2 million plus additional 600,000, plus an additional list of things that you're talking about. So if we decide we want to go higher than that 2.6, then I say, sure, let's talk about that. But I've heard from Sandy and she doesn't sound like she wants to go start talking about higher than the 2.6 yet. Not that those individual things might not be in the budget, but I'd like to kind of hear from everybody else. So the list that you're talking about would be, the default is 2 million. The next list of things that are, I think, being proposed that are still in there is another 600,000. And then there's another $550,000 additional to that.
Okay,
So I
that's the
can,
first time I've heard that number for the, like, I was
Yeah.
waiting for, what is this again?
yeah, this has
If
been the
we, if
same.
we put all the items that we had on that list that we showed a couple times into the proposed. It would be, the proposed would be about a million one higher
Okay.
than.
Instead of the 600,000.
And one more question about the apportionment. I'm trying to find the information. Did we get the adequacy aid numbers? That. And my question comes in, I just learned about the hold harmless grant. Has that been accounted for with the adequacy numbers?
You have information on a hold harmless grant? I don't have that information. I haven't seen anything of that.
That's last year's.
Yeah, well,
Do you know, does that sound familiar at all to you, or is that? So it's a, in 2025. It's gonna be compared to against 104% of the fiscal year. Funding, it's an adequacy aid, okay. Adequacy aid is calculated, I'm looking at Department of Education. Okay, how it's calculated, and then the cost of adequacy. And then, let me just see, for 2025, the base per pupil rate is 4182. That's 4,000 per ADM. Adequacy includes rates for certain things, free and reduced, English language learners, all that. But, and then it's how it's determined. And then there's a new hold harmless grant. After the preliminary grant plus extraordinary needs grant is calculated, that number is compared against 104% of the fiscal year 2024 estimate of the adequacy grant as estimated by NHED on 11/15/2022. If the preliminary grant plus the extraordinary needs grant is less than 104% of the 2022 fiscal year 2024 estimate, then a hold harmless grant is added to ensure that community receives at least 104% of the 2022 estimate.
The hold harmless is part of the adequacy. So the adequacy I used on the estimated revenue is what I received from the state for total estimated adequacy. And that includes any hold harmless money.
Okay, it's all part and parcel. Okay.
All right, anything else, Lisa?
I'm good.
Go around. I think I'll go to you, John.
Well, I think the question is, can we reduce the default budget? And, you know, along with that, of course, do we want to even try? The default budget, of course, is, I think we said it's about 2 million higher than last year. And given that we're trying to promote a CTE program, that's, you know, that you know, it's unfortunate that both those things are happening at the same time. So I guess I'll, you know, some questions have been raised about how this whole CTE funding will work. I think Sandy's question is a good question. I think, though, that as Ruben said, this funding pot will not be distributed in drips and drabs the way the wastewater project fund was done. But having said that, people are going to have questions, and there's a lot of education to do. And we met last week, right after, on Monday to talk a little bit about that. But the big question is, can we reduce this budget anymore? And my understanding is, while the default budget is, determined by law, by things that we have agreed to in warrant articles and by the staffing patterns that we've identified as necessary to fulfill our commitment. There are changes, well, my understanding is there are changes we could make in our staffing strategy that would affect that default budget.
We did it last year, right? Our proposed budget was below default. So certainly, yeah.
So the questions that I have is, can we do that in a way that does not harm our educational objectives? And should we?
Kim?
Having sat in on that meeting, obviously everybody doesn't want their taxes to go up, and it's difficult. And I guess my biggest question is how we're going to show the community what we need at the same time that we want to pay less, but in order to get what we want, it's really hard to do that. And thank you to the finance committee and everybody else who's working on it so hard, and there's so many things involved. And even opening the community's eyes to, like, I think we had talked about special ed, stuff that we can't do anything about, and still wanting things like the CTE program. And we can't be the kind of school that everybody wants to come to if we aren't. They're talking about, I think with that meeting, we talked about all the buildings and the people that we're trying to bring into the community. And if we don't have a school that people want to go to with the new programs, if other schools are offering things. So to help people understand why we're doing what we're doing, but still trying to get it down at the same time. I think those are hard things to do. And I don't even know how to do it, but opening their eyes. And I was glad to see that Tom Coney was there. And I remember last year, he came to a lot of meetings, but people going to meetings or talking to us or anything to kind of help with the process would be really good.
All right, thanks, Kim. Charlie, I know you've been digging into the budget, since our last meeting, so gonna share some of your views.
Hours and hours looking at the numbers. All right, first thing I'm gonna say is there's no way I'm gonna support a budget that raises the tax on a $300,000 house in Rindge by $900. It just ain't gonna happen. I'd be remiss if I voted for something like that because it's not affordable for my taxpayers. Okay, so what I tried to do is think, is there another way of looking at this? So that we can, think outside of the box and come in with some numbers that are a little bit lower. So I put together a few slides. And first slide is, I just wanted us to understand and consider an alternative budget concept. Just look at it and see if it makes any sense. In this presentation, surplus means the amount of budget unspent. Doesn't include the retained unassigned fund balance, which we typically roll over each year. Okay. And the surplus that you see is usually spent down at the end of the year, so it's not the true surplus. This is the surplus that's spent on things that we don't have in a budget. Okay. Just like this year, if we have a surplus, we're going to try to spend down some other things from next year. Okay, so the surplus is usually a lot higher than what you see at the end of the year. Next slide. In 22-23, we had a proposed budget of 27.5 and a default budget of 27. taxpayers disapproved the voters disapproved our proposed budget. We went to a default. To do that, we had to cut 541K. We did that without cutting any people. We just cut positions and we went to a block schedule. And we ended up the year with a $750,000 surplus. So if you add those numbers up, what you find out is to do what we actually needed to do in 22-23, we only needed 26.2 instead of 27.5 to propose. Okay, if we go to the next year, 23-24, we had an operating budget of 31.8 and a surplus of 1.9. And that means that we actually needed 29.9 instead of 31.7 to do what we actually did. Okay. So going on to the next slide. The current way we develop a budget is too complex for the layman to understand. It's an operating budget versus adopted budget versus general fund versus encumbrance, etc. There's over 2,000 line items to review and it's overwhelming. So what if we just use a few simple questions? What will we spend this year to do what we're telling the voters we're going to do? And how much less or more do we need to spend next year than we're spending to do that this year? So I took a shot at what are we going to spend this year? Okay, which is the next slide. If I look at our 24-25 adopted budget, and we have a projected surplus from unspent salaries and benefits, I come up, this number is not that important unless it's, except that it's big. I came up with 1.2 mil, another shot I came up with 988,000. All right, but still in all, it's a large surplus. So next slide. So if you take the proposed operating budget, okay, for 25-26, the 34.9, and you subtract what our operating budget was this year, the 32.4, you end up with a year-over-year increase of about $2.5 million. So if you take that $2.5 million and you add it to what we think we're going to actually spend this year, we end up with a proposed operating budget that's much less. In this case, it's 1.2 mil. It could be 988K. Okay, but the point is that the proposed operating budget does not have to be in addition to what the budget was last year. In other words, next year's proposing operating budget isn't this year's budget plus the increase. It's this year's what we're going to spend plus the increase. And that's a big difference because it accounts for the surplus. So if you go to the next slide, it says, well, what do we do with the surplus? The surplus is still there. We can still use it the way we used to use it. We can use it to pay down things. We can use it to buy the 550. We can use it on warrant articles, to fund warrant articles. It's still there. It doesn't go away. The only thing that happens is we truthfully say at the end of the year that we're going to have a budget increase that represents the true increase in spending and not the increase above budget. Because if you don't spend budget this year, next year your budget is based on this year's budget and you're already got a surplus next year. And that's something we want to avoid. At least I think we should. So I would think that there's an opportunity there to use some outside of the box thinking and to see if there's different ways that we might look at how we present the proposed budget to make it less, or I should say more affordable to taxpayers. Like I said, I cannot approve a 25-26 operating budget that's going to cost us, $800-900 per home in taxes. It's not affordable. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And I think, part of what we've seen that, in the last year, certainly, and we talked a little bit about taxes, but the only reason, right, when the voters voted last year on the budget, they saw they were going to get a tax increase based on, our projections at the time. Well, it turns out, that we handed back our surplus and they got, I'm not sure if it was a decrease, maybe it's probably depends on your evaluation, but I know the Ringe tax rate went down. I'm expecting that the Jaffrey school tax rate is going to go down as well, right? So what we advertised was an increase, but what they actually got was a decrease. So managing this surplus, I think, is important, because now what's happening next year is that essentially, it's assuming they're not going to get any money back in surplus, right? That number. So they're getting like 2 years worth of tax increases. And, there's a good chance we may give back another 1.5 million in surplus, and it'll be less than that. But managing the tax rate that way and relying on that surplus every year leads to these big jumps, I think, is what we've seen.
And to the default. If you look at the default, by law, it's based on this year's budget. So let's say we're 2 million underspent this year. Our default for next year is already inflated by $2 million because it's based on budget, not on what we actually made and what we actually spent. So we end up with these surpluses, and it's just a giant slush fund for us to use whatever we want, because it's extra money that you knew we weren't going to spend, but we put it in the budget anyway. So anyway, as far as line items are concerned, I've been through line items. It's very difficult because I was trying to compare adjusted budget with adopted budget so that the budget line items didn't line up. It's hard to tell what's a stipend and what's salary, which part of a Social Security, health insurance is related to stipends, and which part of that is related to salaries. And when you look at, there are at least 3 positions where there's 0 spending year to date, and the entire budget amount is encumbered, which basically says we haven't hired them, and if we hire them today, we're going to spend everything for the rest of the year, plus what we didn't spend. And that's ridiculous. I mean, there's so many things in this thing that I don't understand. They might be absolutely 100% legitimate, but you don't understand them. And it's very hard to get your arms around. Why are we having this surplus every year? I think part of it is because we base budget on budget instead of basing budget on what the heck we actually spend. So that's kind of where I'm at.
The other thing about the surplus is it's nice people say, oh, yes, it's my tax rate. Oh, we get, but then the other thing they say, why'd they raise that money? They didn't need it.
I think it's important that the communication, Kim, I appreciate what you said about communication. And we have had, we've talked about this ad nauseum as a school board, and about the fact that a lot of our money that we return is as a result of not hiring specific positions that are needed. And that it is not a sustainable world to continue to operate on that little bit of help, because it's coming at a significant expense. And if we had the ability to hire those people, we would need the funds to do so. And we are always actively trying to do that. At some point in time, for the survival, we need to get to the point where we're hiring all the staff that we are budgeting for. And so, I think it's important to note, hey, people may have that question of why did you need this budget? Why are you even giving back so much and so forth? There's a couple of things. One, the district has done an exceptional job over the past decade, at least, in managing budgets and making sure that we are spending properly, and that we're not spending in a way that, like, oh, if we don't have someone, we're using the money just for whatever purpose. No, we realize if it's not utilized, we're going to make sure that we can provide that back to the taxpayers. And we've been very good at that over the last decade. 1 year we had it was difficult. I think that the other piece is that, hey, if we were, it's not the school district that is saying, hey, we want to have an extra $1 million here. That we don't, that is, we just want to have it as a quote unquote slush fund or extra just in case. We haven't ever, during my time anyway, we have not ever communicated that And we have had those situations with high, at times, high surpluses due to the fact of not being able to get what is needed. The need hasn't changed. How we figured out on a temporary level to get it done has changed. So we are certainly figuring things out, but we've also figured things out at the expense of human capital. And that's not a sustainable way to go. Just as raising budgets, millions of dollars, is not sustainable in another way. So I do think that we have to, look at the whole conversation. And so the default budget, for instance, includes, those things, those people, those positions that are mandated through law, IEPs, et cetera. Having been able to get all of those individuals and hire them every year, no. But they are still required, and we need to get that. We have figured out how to provide services by having people do 2, sometimes more jobs in order to do that. Again, not a sustainable approach to do that, so that we, do what we need to. But the other piece is that, like, for instance, we're going up, the budget is what, 2 million higher than the last year's budget. The default budget is. We had warrant articles over the last couple of years where people have approved, the taxpayers have approved the CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements for both the JRSSA and the JREA. And this year, a couple of those JREA years get put into place, about to 1.1 million, and you got another, couple 100,000 in JRSSA, plus any type of increases that come along with health insurance and so forth, because those are all contractual obligations. They were approved. Voters previously approved those. And so going back and saying, but we're not interested in improving that 1 million now that we have it, is not the way to go either, nor can we do that. The voters approved those CBAs. One, they were extraordinarily fair CBA. If you were to compare what our CBAs are with others, we're certainly not in a spot where we're higher than anyone else. We're in a really sweet spot there, and it's a very fair negotiation. But people are aware of the hiring situation within the region, within the state, with perhaps the nation as well, with a lot of different positions, not just teachers. And so absolutely, to be able to get the teachers that you need to have, to get the staff in general that you need to have, you need to be able to be competitive at the very least. And that's where we're at. We're at a competitive spot. So people voted in that way to be competitive. Part of the budget is to remain competitive, to retain individuals as well as to attract new ones who, if we need those positions filled anyway, to be able to philosophically believe in what we are doing so that we can do the betterment for our school district and our community. And it does cost money. It costs a lot of money to upkeep facilities, to pay salaries. Again, 75 to 80% of our budget is salaries and benefits, and also to provide the obligations that we have for different types of schooling needs that certain groups of individuals need to have, where then it can't be provided here. So it's a big conversation. And so there's a couple things that, it's all, yes, let's get that budget to a number that is reasonable, that we can be able to confidently talk about with our neighbors. But also let's not be ashamed of what we've been putting forward and saying, we didn't need that. It wasn't needed. It was needed. We were unfortunate and that we weren't able to provide some of the services that we needed, or in a way that would have been healthier. And so this budget represents a healthy approach at moving forward. I say healthy, the health and well-being of adults primarily, to be able to give I think what is becoming exceptional education for the learners in this community, which serves for the future of this community.
And thank God that the default budget is structured in such a way that it does protect us and take into account things like CBAs and other obligations.
Right.
But what we're looking for is a middle ground that's gonna prevent a huge tax increase that we know isn't sustainable. So how do we get there?
So
No, Charlie.
last year we had a 1.8 mil surplus.
Mhm.
About half that surplus because comes from sped because we couldn't fill the positions.
Yes.
This time around the budget, I specifically asked Jen, what can we do to fill those? Do we need to increase compensation? What, do we need to change working conditions? What are the things we can do to get those people on board? And her response was that their people are not there. They're just not out there. So we're holding open positions for people that will not be filled this year or next year. So the question I have in my mind is, why aren't we changing our approach? We gotta provide the services. So are we doing some outsourcing? Are we doing something to satisfy the need of those kids and provide those services when we don't have anybody in seat to do it? We can't just sit here and say, gee, we need to budget for these seats because it's not solving our problem.
Well, the answer is that we have started to go out for contracted services. Yeah.
And let's reflect that in our 25-26 budget. Let's not put positions in there that we know we're not gonna fill. Let's say that we're gonna purchase services, put it in the right line item and put the amount in there. Because it's craziness for us to keep having a surplus year over year over year and complaining that we can't, fill positions. It's just mind blowing. Sorry if I get overworked.
I think we have a lot of confidence in what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do with your leadership. But I think Charlie's describing something that we're all observing and we're looking for a solution. And as you know, we're working in a financial and political environment that's, it's ours, we own it. And we're also in the midst of an opportunity that other districts don't have this year, which is the CTE. So what's the strategy that can allow us to maintain the confidence of the voters and provide the education we need?
Yeah, I think that if we were to move forward with what we have right now, the proposed budget, I think we'd most likely be assuredly looking at the default. Like, I can't see the voters voting that in.
So I would be looking at, for someone on the floor.
Yep.
To make a motion to reduce
By $1 million.
the proposed budget by $1 million below default.
Yeah, That's
I know
likely.
Gerda,
Yeah, she did last year. She
Yeah.
tried to get $500,000.
and we packed the thing with,
Reasonable people came out and indicated that that was not acceptable and they shot that down.
and I think that that's the wrong way to go. I think that we should take a, if we're gonna go that way, I will guarantee you there will be other opponents show up. We move forward the way we're moving, I will guarantee there will be other people showing up this time around. They didn't show up last time. I think they will this time. You're talking, $800-900 for a house. That's a lot of money.
And I think it puts the CTC program in jeopardy.
So reality right now, this year, is we are not looking at an influx of people knocking on our door for these positions. the need for, especially in special education, the need for quality qualified people is only growing. Those people simply aren't there right now. And I don't know what that will break, it's not a sustainable position right now. Our government is not public school friendly and will not support us in trying to meet those needs. I know in Ringe, the Heritage Christian School is completing a major construction project with 3 large new classrooms, and it's expanding their student body. And I think it was like $30+ million that they raised for that. I know that it's great when we can go back in the summer and say the taxpayers were giving this money back. It feels good here to be able to do that. Every single year that's thrown back in our face as you guys didn't need it after all.
Right.
It's just thrown back in our face at these big public meetings. It's never publicized that we're gonna, it's just thrown back at us. I think they want to see it now. They want to see it projected that we're not going to need this money. They don't want to say afterthought. Every year we can give back this money.
It's just, I think it feels like a gamble, are those people gonna come knocking at our door all of a sudden? And sorry, we don't have the money to hire you. I know, they're probably not. I know. Optimistic.
I think we do have some analysis, Ruben, right, of some of those, of that, I guess, surplus and what it was on. As far as how much the actual surpluses were and based on unfilled positions, I think last year was like $1 million or so of that surplus was unfilled positions.
This is what we're talking over here.
We have a surplus from people who were hired late. The budget was for starting on July 1. And depending on when they were hired, there's some portion of the salary and benefits that were not spent and will not be spent. I don't know what that is.
Carrie, do you have any insight, any thoughts as you've been listening to this? Because I think it's important to know how how this all kind of pans out and what the needs and the difficulties are. What are some of the trends? What have you seen over the years from a financial standpoint? I know revenues are a big piece of this conversation as well. And I know revenues in some, especially student services, is decreasing.
Right, so back in fiscal year 22-23, the surplus Charlie spoke about of $750,000. 500,000 of that was actually in excess revenue. It wasn't on the expenditure side, it was in excess revenue. And historically, our excess revenue would come from special ed aid. We received more than what we anticipated when we finalized our revenues, because we never know what the final number is going to be when the revenues have to be finalized with the state. So I've always budgeted that conservatively because there are times when they don't fully fund what we expect we're going to get. So in 22-23, our actual expenditures were only $247,000 below our budgeted expenditures. In 23-24, of the surplus we had there, on the expenditure side, it was 1.2 million less we had available on the expenditures. 643,000 was in excess revenue. So 1 million of that 1.2 that we didn't spend on expenditures came from salaries and benefits. And that, as Ruben stated, was largely due to unfilled positions or changes due to staff leaving and hiring new staff and changes in open enrollment. This year, the special ed revenue that we budgeted originally was reduced by 25,000 because it was anticipated the state was not going to be giving us as much as even my conservative number was. So it doesn't look like this year we will have any excess revenue in special ed aid. So just to share that, I'm not sure where we're going to stand from a revenue standpoint. It might be pretty close to even. And you won't see that in the surplus because we won't have the significant increase in or excess in revenue. Does that make sense? Also, I'm sorry, one more thing I want to add. The $1.1 million we have right now that's not encumbered in salaries and benefits. Substitutes, co-curriculars, athletics, any temporary help and overtime, none of that's encumbered. Substitutes right now, we're going at a run rate of about 340,000 if it continues. For the whole year in expenditures, we budgeted 195,000. So if it continues the same trend, we will not have enough budgeted in that line. Co-curriculars and athletics, we have about 32,000 left, and we've budgeted only through the winter sports, and I'm not even sure if all of them have been encumbered yet. So just to give you an idea, that doesn't, just because we have 1.1 million doesn't mean that's what we'll have left at the end of the year.
We take a look, go ahead, Charlie.
I appreciate the input from Carrie. Just a couple. When I go through it, I see a little bit different picture. I look at gasoline. Gasoline was budgeted at 106,000, right? Next year it's going to 130. Price of gasoline is right now pretty much level, right around the 3.25 mark, right? So we've reduced our forecast for next year budget from 160 to 130. Yeah, to this year we're encumbering 170 or 160. And I don't understand if our prices are going down, why we're encumbering the budget amount. Why don't we just reduce that? I mean, that's just one question. I don't even get into details why. I'm just saying, these are things that pop up as you go through this and try to review it. So to me, it's much more complex than what it needs to be. We're asking the board to be accountants to review this budget. And I don't think that's fair.
I'm sorry, Charlie, what is it you don't think is fair?
What?
What is it you don't think is fair?
I don't think it's fair to have to ask the board, the accountants, to review this budget.
Okay,
Try to find a stipend in there. Does it come under salaries? And as if it comes under salaries, how does it compare to the benefits? I mean, it's tracking line item to line item to line item.
well, I feel that that what Carrie is doing, trying to manage this very complex organization, she's using the tools that she needs for. But yeah, for us as board members, yeah, they're hard to work with, for sure. But I don't know what the solution is there.
I mean, I think if the summary data is provided, right? So you can certainly dig down to it at the lowest level if you want to, and I know we all do to some extent, but I mean, the summary data is there to see where the increases are year after year, right? We're looking at the 1.3 million that, to Ruben's point, was voted on last year. Those are increases in the CBA. Right, so those are gonna be added on, those contractually approved and voted on. There's some small facilities increases that don't add up to too much. In the proposed budget, there's, the SAU increases of about $300,000, which again are personnel, right? I think this board all agrees that we want to support our personnel, that are working hard, that are taking on these things. So to me, that something that needs to be in there. We need to account for those increases. But what I hear us having trouble is, and I remember vaguely having the same conversations last year. If when you look at the list of, open personnel and how long it's been open for, and I do understand that, we do need these positions. Is there some sort of risk-based approach that we could take? So that, let's say there's $1 million in, unfilled positions last year, and we're predicting the same thing this year. Is it a possibility to take a hard look at that and say, hey, listen, do an analysis and say these positions haven't been filled for 3 years, or what's the likelihood we have this need? Do we fund half of it? Right? You can literally go across and say, this position, what are the chances? that we're
What's a
gonna fund it?
reasonable assumption?
What's a reasonable
based on what we've
assumption
seen?
and use that data to say, like, listen, we have, again, I'm gonna oversimplify it and say we have 10 open positions that we need. Are we gonna hire all 10? I think we need to have a hard discussion about that, right? Do we, they haven't been filled for years, or if they're in a position of like high need, scarcity.
So you're kind of saying like if there's, for fair numbers, if there's 10, if we split that and say, okay.
Well, I don't know what the
budget for
ratio would be,
5,
but
right?
is that a
Yeah.
possibility?
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not gonna cut the salary, right? You're not gonna cut the salaries we're contractually obligated to pay,
Mhm.
right? I don't hear a lot of desire to start, cutting services, cutting positions. I don't think we want to impact our current educational trajectory by saying, all right, in order to account for this increase in special ed, we're gonna, cut services, athletics, things like that. I'm not hearing any of that. So I think the only options are to look at maybe those unfilled positions and then the other non-salary budget lines. Either take if we are looking to cut more, either taking a targeted approach and saying, all right, these, or just simply saying, if the board decides we want to hit a number, we have say $6 million of this that's non-salary, that is, different line items for facilities, athletics, whatever, and, pick a number, 5% to get us there. I don't know. I think those are, if we're talking about cutting, right, those are options. We're either cutting existing positions, we're either cutting, expenses, or positions that, may get hired. And I think that what I'm hearing here is more palatable to start looking at those things where, aren't actual people doing jobs right now, but are funded.
So, Ruben, you can tell we're not really sure exactly what the best direction is, but what do you think about what we're nibbling around the edge of here?
So I think a couple things. One, I think, regardless of where we, whoops, let me, plug it in here. Start off with. The concept that you've done is one that we've actually budgeted, we've done every single year. So we've gone through and done trend analysis data to find out what our average, for instance, usually in special education, what our average increase in or surpluses and so forth, and we've cut 200,000, 250,000. 1 year we cut a little bit more, but then we maybe got too close. Especially during that year that we had the fall budget and so forth. That was a very difficult year. So we've done that. I think you know, there's some reasonable numbers to continue to possibly do that with. So the concept, the idea of increasing by a certain amount, like someone said, you know, gambling a little bit, it's not necessarily a gamble, we have some things in place where you have an unassigned fund balance, you know, retention that you can utilize. We do have a student services reserve fund and so forth. And we've budgeted based upon trends and said, this is what we spent, this is what we've done, and so forth. I think some of that's within this budget as well, because we, as Charlie stated, take the budget from before and do that, and we have done that to an extent. There might be some other, we could try to do that a little bit. I guess I would caution to the extent you do that. When you're talking like $1 million, I think when Carrie mentions like in the 22-23 year, and yeah, we had you know, several $100,000, but only 250,000 of that was really the surplus, right? Because the other piece of it was like these unanticipated or over revenued money that had to go back anyway. It was never going to be ours unless we loaded on it. But a lot of that comes in as a game. It's certainly, you know, we get that in June or July or August, and we can attribute it to the last year's or the previous year's budget. So then, yeah, this past year, we did have that big number that we were able to provide back. And so 650,000 of it roughly was that revenue-ish money. And then the 1.2 million, and 1.2 million is high. You know, I've always felt like if you can have a surplus of 2% of your budget, you're in a safe place and you have good cash flow and so forth. And we've talked about that 2% number before. So a couple of years ago, we were at that 1%. And then last year we were, oh gosh, you know, at 4 or 5%, which is high. The pattern is not, I would feel very comfortable if we had like $1 million every single year to go, okay, well, I think I don't know if I'd go with $1 million, but I think there's a healthy risk that you could take within there, and you have enough kind of a backup to be able to do something if something were to take place. Taking the revenue out of the situation, especially because things are changing, and we have a commissioner who's telling people that, oh, you know, special ed aid is going to be less, and we have, you know, conversations at the federal level, Department of Education, you know, there's an uncertain kind of future there with that and what we see for revenue. And so I don't think that can be guaranteed. You probably can guarantee that you're going to have the $250,000, you know, 1%. You might even be able to guarantee that because we've typically had 2%. Again, that year is an outlier. But that's not $1 million. That's not $1.2 million. That's not $1.5 million. And so,
Was it like 6?
well, 2% gets you that back to default, right? So, I mean, if our default is 6% higher, I guess 2% gets you about 0.5% below default, but that's still 5.5% higher than, you know, the budget. That's still a hefty increase. So it's a conundrum. Again, if you were going to ask, all right, I want you to cut 2 million out of there, to me, it's not, we could say, let's see what happens. I would feel very irresponsible not cutting positions and trying to figure out the structure that was going to take place to make that $2 million. Or I'm using 2, because you haven't mentioned 2 necessarily, but that is how much higher it is than last year, or this current year. You know, that's people, that's positions, because we haven't even included the $500,000 in a lot of the, you know, things that we typically would input in this, because it was like, it's going to be taken out of anyway. Why bother putting that into the conversation? And we've gotten into a habit of buying things sooner. So we're in a bit of a pattern. But the pattern isn't that we have $1 million surplus.
Right. What is our,
without having the revenue.
what is our special education trust fund at?
About half a million.
Half a million?
Yeah.
So there's that, and maybe we should continue to bump that a little bit. But
I mean, and we've taken the tact in the past years to budget what we believe was appropriate for special education, what was needed for special education by using trend data and not just the per person. So we've taken that into consideration often.
right,
I don't know as though we've, because of the revenue situation with special ed, we have, and knowing what was likely to be the end result of it, I don't know as though we took that into consideration this year because we expected quite a hefty revenue reduction. Because the Department of Ed said they were going to reduce. So, like you said, we typically, might budget 60% of CAT aid, right? Or what used to be called CAT aid, catastrophic aid. But we'd get like 80% back, so you'd have quite a bit left. Not the 100% that you're promised, that you need, but still it'd be 80%. So it was okay, not too bad. No, we're budgeting 65%, and we're getting 67%. So the buffer is not there. So some of our revenue has been a buffer for us. So I think Charlie's right. Creativity is the only way you're gonna get it down. I'm not arguing with that. However we go and proceed, we just have to have really good, clear communication. I would advocate that we have the resources to continue the progress that we've made and not, cut it short. But also what I was trying to say before, maybe not very succinctly, maybe, is I think we're at a spot where a lot has changed over time, and we can be proud of a lot of things that we've done. And it's okay to get out there and say, support your schools. And, taxes are going up. I think we need to look at this further and figure this out. But I also I can say without a shadow of a doubt that we're not putting forward a budget that's irresponsible from the standpoint of we have these desired slush funds and so forth. We're putting forward what we believe we need. The individuals who are working here and put forth the budget are saying this is the minimum of what's going forward. And we've been good at working with a minimum for a long period of time. And there are certain things based upon largely due to the way the state operates. We know that, we can complain about it all the time. That causes communities such as ours to get into these squabbles about taxes because it's ridiculous, and it's designed. I believe it's designed that way to cause risk.
well, I feel like it's your fault because all this, yours and Charlie's fault. All this creativity you guys have been doing this past 9 years. So let's keep it up.
Well, but as we have conversations,
I hate walking
Yeah.
up this long, empty walkway when I leave the meeting or I come into the meeting. I really like to see it filled with something useful.
So,
With you.
for me, I'm not the school board. It's not my budget. Once you adopt a budget, you have to adopt a budget that you feel is responsible and that you can put forward in front of the taxpayers. And that's going to be also providing our learners the most important part of all of this with what they need for their positive future, and hopefully a positive future within this community. And it is getting more and more expensive everywhere in every situation. And so these increases are not necessarily out of line with everything else that's been happening. The school district isn't insulated from everything else that's happened in the world and the increases that come along with that. And also the social, I'll call it the social increases. And I don't mean that in a positive way. I mean, there are a lot more needs out there that aren't being met, that we are expected or have to in order to reach the academic attainment that we want to have, to be able to get there. We provide more social, emotional supports than ever. And we should. We're the organization that knows how to help.
I think
But
we need
it
to make
costs
some
what it
bold,
costs. It's unfortunate.
I think we need to make some bold assertions on where we're going educationally.
Mhm.
And in terms of our adequacy, not adequacy, but, you know, our meeting of the state standards. Sounds like we're moving in the right direction, and I think we should make that case in terms of our reading and our ELA scores, and make the claim that we're gonna continue, but we need the support.
That's the type of communication I think we're at that point where we have made some pattern work, that's improvement. And we have to, our investment is in continuing to improve. Now, doing so somewhere in the middle. It's gonna cost, it just is. It's taxes go up, they do, and we are fortunate to have had last year's. Some people were not fortunate in order to get that, but we as a district were able to provide that. We didn't go crazy, although we tried to buy a few more things, and try to, not, try to spend it in a variety of different ways. We gave it back. We knew it was important to our taxpayers. They had had increases the previous year. It's good to give them that relief. It isn't healthy to go up and down like that, so that's something that is a very true statement that was mentioned here tonight. You want to have things be a little more even.
Yeah,
And for a while,
it is nice,
we had a
it
good
is nice
6 years.
overall that they didn't
Yeah.
have to pay that,
Yeah.
right? That,
When you
when taxes, what's up?
when you went up.
The school, the town did, not the school tax. That's correct. Well, I can't control
It
it.
didn't go up as much as it would have gone up. But it went up.
What went up?
The school tax.
The rate went down by a penny.
This year, that's what we were told, anyway, yeah. That the school,
That must be the most recent one then.
Yeah, the one that we just
I'm
got a
looking at the
couple
one
weeks
I got in
ago.
the tax bill.
That's right. Went down by a penny.
that being said, it wasn't planned to have gone down that much. It was planned to have gone up. We have people in the community who voted for education last year. They actually, for the first time ever, which I'm so proud of this district, put $90,000 back into the 89.5 back into the budget last year to, improve and add, resources for Ridge Memorial School. That was awesome. It was like the best feeling, I think, of my experience here at all, was just seeing that happen, because that was a culture shift. There are other things that happened during that evening that was a big culture shift. I hope that continues. We want to continue to bring the community along and have us work in partnership with one another for the betterment of our kids. Finding a way to do that while also being financially sustainable is important too. We have a wide array of stakeholders, so we're going to have people who will come, even if we're equal with the default, we equalize everything. Just have someone come in and try to take 500,000, $1 million or whatever like that. We see that happening in various places. That might happen. You could decrease this by $1 million, it'd still be too high for somebody, and they will do that. And you're same as me. We have the concern about, we have this budget, and we have the CTE. Those are two important and sizable.
And I
warrant articles.
think last year, right, we were in this situation where we were having this discussion, except it wasn't CTE, it was the teacher contract,
teacher
right? The
contract.
teacher contract. So
Yeah.
that's why we went as far as to propose that budget, below default. And we're able to do so and get the contract passed. To me, looking at these numbers, that would be nice to do that again. I don't know if it's possible or reasonable. Again, without sacrificing the current progress and the learning that's going on in the schools.
We're at an interesting numbers game right now with the number of students we have. So we're at that spot where if, depending where they are, you almost could do some reductions in staff. But it's spread. If we continue to go that trajectory, we're going to be able to, reduce positions at some point, or we're going to have to. Some reductions can't take place because it's not all about numbers. It's about, that's what I mean by societal impacts. Things are different. The makeup of the classroom is different than it ever has been. It's continuing, that pattern is continuing, and it requires a lot of support. But also, we're not in those numbers, as we've talked about before, is we're still paying for certain aspects of charter schools. We're still, paying for, other aspects of education when those kids aren't necessarily accessing this school by itself. So there's those costs that continue to climb. What would be a number that the board would want to go for and put forward? What would you feel comfortable with the board? I guess that's what my question would be. It's a lot of money. That's a big number. Yes.
That's just a question to the board or a thought. So if you're looking at the increase in expenditures in the budget, the proposed has $130,000 dollars in it to increase the special revenue, which is the grant funds. That's offset by $130,000 in revenue. So just keep that in mind that I think it's actually around 540,000, the proposed over the default. 130,000 of that is to increase the grant expenditures, which is offset by revenue. So there's no tax impact. The board could look at budgeting a return of surplus to the voters as part of the revenues. So it reduce the tax impact rather than necessarily reducing the expenditures. So I guess it depends on how you look at it.
Nice out of the boxing.
Okay.
Keep going, Carrie.
So are you saying,
Where else?
Carrie, like that $130,000 could be that figure specifically, or is it just in general? Is that something we can do?
Well, that I was reminding you of that. The reason for the increase in the grant expenditure portion of the operating budget is due to the fact that last year we spent more than what we budgeted in that particular fund. It's part of the total operating budget. And if you overexpend in one area, you have to offset it by not expending that amount in one of the other funds, which would be food service or the general fund. So in order to increase the grant expenditure fund to the amount that we're looking at possibly spending this year, that was why I proposed the $130,000 increase to that. But as I said, it's offset by an equal amount of revenue. So you could remove that, but it's, I would not remove it. Maybe we could reduce it to, we could try another maybe 50 or 60,000. That's cutting it a little close, in my opinion. But you could reduce part of that in the proposed. You also could put in the revenue side an anticipated return of surplus to the taxpayers. That's considered revenue. And that would reduce the tax impact, but it would not reduce the difference in the expenditures.
that might be a more palatable way to go. And then you're not in danger necessarily, apart from raising taxes higher.
There's a risk.
Of course, yeah, but what you're saying is that you could put revenue as the money you think you're going to be
Maybe 500,000.
returning. Which doesn't change the number. But it changes the tax impact or the proposed estimated.
For both. We'll change it for both.
Thing to consider is that comes right off the top. Comes off before any warrant article, and before any retained unassigned fund balance.
Do you mean by what you're stating is that at the end of the year,
At the end of the
prior
year,
to any other warrant articles being funded, that is the first thing that happens?
right?
Didn't hear all of that, sorry.
Okay, so if the scenario were that we had 3 warrant articles, one of them was the budget, one of them was funding the special ed trust fund from surplus, if there is any, and one was funding the facilities warrant article from surplus, if any, that if we were to budget the revenue as in returning surplus, a certain amount, let's say 800,000. And we had a surplus of 600,000. That entire 600,000 would first go back to, it's not even first, would go back to the community and not fund the other warrant articles. Or would the other ones be funded first and then the remaining would go back? I think personally, I think legally, the other warrant articles would be funded.
Right.
I think that you as a board would be like, well, but that's not what we promised, or that's not what we put forward. So that's a different story.
But what you're talking about is something that happens after the end of the fiscal year,
Mhm.
all right, as opposed to a line item in the budget that says you're gonna make a payment in the current fiscal year.
Mhm.
All right, so that's something that you have to do in the current fiscal year. Whereas the warrant articles are after the end of the current
Yeah.
fiscal year.
Right.
At least that's the way I look at it.
So Carrie, we would we actually, before the budget closes, make a payment to the town of Jaffrey and the town of Bryn? Of that?
No,
No.
you're talking about for any return of surplus, is that what you're?
Yes.
Yes, no, that just goes to reduce the taxes. It's considered a revenue.
Yeah.
When revenues are finalized, so that wouldn't be finalized until September.
Sure.
When I finalize it with the Department of Revenue.
Yeah.
So any revisions to the revenue are made then, but I have to justify any revisions to the Department of Revenue when I speak to them.
Mhm.
To explain why anything is different from what is put forth to them in March or April. When the MS 22 is due. So, I believe what Charlie was asking is if we had the warrant articles, they're all funded in order. So that's why you have specific orders. You have warrant article 2, which if we put the bond forward, that would be before the operating budget, then the operating budget would be warrant article 3. And then any collective bargaining agreements, warrant articles would be after that, and then the trust funds are last. I could confirm with legal counsel, but I believe all of those get funded, and then it's determined what your surplus is after that. So we could estimate on our revenues that we expect to give a return of surplus amount, but that's not guaranteed.
Right, and the other warrant articles would be dealt with and funded prior to determining the surplus.
Right, yes.
That's what I meant.
Well, how can you fund it if you don't know what the surplus is?
So the warrant articles you're talking about for the trust fund?
Yeah.
The trust funds, it depends on how the warrant article is worded. Either you're raising and appropriating, or you're using up to a certain, you're appropriating up to a certain amount if you're taking it out of any surplus funds. So the warrant article is written different depending on whether you're going to use surplus funds from this year or you're going to raise and appropriate taxes for the next year.
I'm talking about surplus.
Surplus, yes, so the warrant article is worded that will raise up to whatever dollar amount you decide you want on the warrant article. And if it's available, it's funded. If the full amount's available, the full amount's funded. If the full amount isn't available, what is available gets funded. So say we have the special education trust fund warrant article listed prior to any additions to the building maintenance trust fund. And we say in our special ed warrant article, we're going to fund up to $50,000 of available surplus, and we have all that available. We fund that. And then our building maintenance trust fund warrant article says we're going to fund up to 500,000 from surplus, but we only have 300,000 after we funded the other warrant articles, then only 300,000 is funded to the building maintenance trust fund. And then there's
You gotta know
no,
what- you
there's
gotta know
no
what your
surplus left
is.
after that.
You gotta know what your surplus is. to
No,
do
because you
that.
find out afterwards. You get the warrant article approved.
You don't have to
conditional
know
on
what your surplus is, no.
No,
If
no,
it's
no.
available, then it's,
To apply the surplus, you have to know what the surplus is.
Well, at the end, by the end of the year, you know what it is.
That's what I'm saying.
In other words, after it's approved, you
Right.
still don't know if you're gonna have the money until you see what your surplus is.
correct, yes, yep.
Okay, and when do you determine what your surplus is?
After all the books are closed.
So what I'm understanding you to say then is if we put in a revenue line for $500,000 at the end of the year, okay, we don't pay the $500,000 to the towns, we don't return it to the towns. If we have 500,000, the first 50 goes to warrant article for special ed. The other 450 goes to maintenance reserve. It was 500, up to 500,000. So those two warrant articles get funded before we give the money back to the towns. Is that correct?
I believe, yes,
Yes.
that's how it would be.
So
Yeah.
that's an outright lie.
That's what,
I don't understand that.
I mean, that's
Well,
what the
we're-
voters are gonna,
Yeah, well, we're telling the voters, we're gonna put a line item in there to return 500,000 to the voters. So they're gonna approve a budget based on a promise to provide $500,000.
all right, but you're gonna have the warrant article describing how this works. And if you're gonna do it right,
It's not
you're
in the
gonna have
warrant,
somebody
but it's not in the
explain.
warrant article. It's in the line item budget. It's in the operating budget. It's not a warrant article.
Right, so I think that a way to do both is to say, we're gonna fund a warrant article out of the surplus, we'll say, for X amount of money, and we're gonna do another one for up to an X amount of money. You subtract those, you assume whatever you have, subtract those, and then you budget your surplus as to what will be going back. So if you think there's gonna be a $1 million surplus and you have warrant articles that could add up to, say, $500,000, then you budget the $500,000 to go back to the communities. That's kind of how it would be.
I mean, it really depends on what the board wants to do for warrant articles. I was just throwing out an idea. In addition, I believe that the fund balance, it's your total fund balance, including what the board has retained. So you still may be able to return that to taxpayers if the board votes to retain less than what it can retain up to.
Well, but it can't retain what's already been spent in the warrant articles.
That's correct.
Correct.
Right, but you've retained 1 point whatever million this year. And that's, unless you spend it this year, you're going to have that as a
Right, it's
retainage.
rolled over.
Yeah,
So then you have to make a decision on what you want in there.
right. So it just
Between
may
two every
reduce
year.
that amount if you're gonna return an amount to taxpayers, you just reduce what you decide to retain.
But I think that what that doesn't answer is the more immediate need to have on the ballot as low a number as possible, that we're not returning money. We are saying this is what we can do. Returning money. Again, back to the thing, it's great. It is not appreciated
Yeah,
as much as showing on the warrant that, and showing on the articles that we have stripped back as far as we can. So how can we strip back the budget right now with in mind that at least $500,000 will be used in surplus to pay for some of this? Is that possible? Can we cut this by $500,000, knowing as a board, we're going to use it in surplus? Because we have more than twice that in surplus right now, or that's what I'm hearing. I might be very mistaken at 9 o'clock at night. To been here for 4 hours. Long day as it is. So can we cut this right now so that what's visible as operating budget proposed already takes into account what we know we're going to spend this summer? Rather than that backtracking, which is creative, it just doesn't answer that face value. This is what's on the ballot.
It's an egg shuffle.
You know, it's- we're too small, people watch, Can we put forth the default budget?
I guess maybe that's what Ruben mentioned this a few minutes ago, but I think we need to provide some direction, right? We're kind of talking around, we're saying reductions, but we need to give him something more concrete than that. So what I hear Lisa saying is like, can we provide a proposed budget, roughly equal to the default budget?
That's
I
what
don't
I'm
know.
saying.
I don't know wherever Charlie,
Without cutting people, without having to scramble, without changing an entire high school's curriculum.
I don't know, I guess, well. Charlie, what are your feelings on, I mean, certainly you've stated you feel it needs to come down, to what level are you talking about?
We have to remember the default budget is based on current budget. It's not based on what we're actually gonna spend. So it doesn't consider any surplus. Okay. I'm looking at the numbers here, and it says for a 300K home and range is gonna cost $915 with the proposed budget. If I cut that $2 million down to $500, that's still a big number. But I don't know.
Which is just really last year's increase, right? Because our default budget's only going up by 2 million. So I mean, if you were to take this year's default and cut 2 million, that would be
I couldn't do
less,
that.
you can't because we have contractual.
Well, no. You have to understand that we've got things in there that it's based on the current budget.
I do
The
understand.
current budget includes surplus. So you've got a surplus in there,
Right.
all right? So the default is actually higher than what you actually need if you only do default.
And I
stuff.
think that's where the debate is, like, what you need, right? What we've been talking about. You're right, that 1.7 million is in there.
But also the default does not include any kind of inflationary increases on any of your utilities or anything else. Okay, so messing with the default budget is, to me, a touchy thing. Because it's it's a slippery slope because you got a lot of stuff in there. you're mixing apples and oranges. You're mixing a current budget with increases based on what's required by law. And if you screw up there, you're gonna end up funding them anyway.
Christie, would you put that up on the screen? I don't know if anybody's watching or anybody's. Oh, okay.
Which one is that, the default?
Yeah, tell me what
Proposed.
It is.
You said the proposed?
I just,
Proposed.
what's your tax
It's the
increase?
draft one of the default
Ugh.
rather than proposed.
I know what Brian will say.
Budget over default.
He's moving. He sold his house.
Yes.
You want budget over
Who's moving in?
default?
Yes,
Frank.
Okay.
yeah, it's the budget overview
Across from
proposed,
you,
Oh, proposed.
with the black dot.
budget overview.
Oh, really? He's moving up there.
That shows the, is it the right one or is it the default one?
Well, the proposed has the default
It
on it
has
as
both
well.
of it,
It's
right?
both, so.
That has both?
Yep.
Because when I was looking at, Charlie, I appreciate both of those statements of there's the surplus built in, and yet when you look at these default numbers and what it goes to, especially like the top numbers where it's the most money, there just isn't an option. Like, I get it that that's a big number as it is. I just don't see the options decreasing.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
okay?
so I just wanted to show, I
Nothing-
wanted to actually physically show that, to whoever's watching, like, I'm not seeing it either. Yeah,
I mean, when you start messing with default, you're a slippery slope because you really gotta.
right. Right. So can we,
What you need to
Propose
do is
this.
to put out a proposed budget, it's what you think is a reasonable balance between affordability of the taxpayer and educational benefit. Okay? If you put a balance out, then you've done the best you can do.
that's the dinner card, that'd be great.
So I'd like to just, or I think thinking about this, take a look at the schedule and like what we need to meet. I feel like we're not gonna come to certainly an approved budget tonight, right? We still have some things to talk about and figure out. But looking at the schedule, I'd like to be sure we're still on track. We have another school board meeting on the 16th. And then, it's into next year.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly certain that we need to wrap this up by the end of this year. I'm
Yeah.
looking at the deadlines. It looks like the 14th of January is the last date to post notice of budget hearing. And our budget and bond hearings are the 16th of January. So is if I'm looking at like a drop, not that we want to get close to that, but am I reading that correctly? Like a drop dead date for having
All warrant
Oh.
articles. What's the drop deadline for all warrant articles, Gary? I think it's early January.
9th?
At the
Yeah.
budget hearing, all warrant articles finalized, and prior to the budget hearing, I need to have all of the data so that I can present the warrant articles with dollar amounts.
Right,
So we don't usually have it any later than the middle of December, because there's a lot of work that needs to go into preparing all the documents, plus we have to post notice in the paper.
got it. Okay. Charlie,
I'm okay with the Special Education Trust Fund, 50K being funded through surplus. And I'm okay with the maintenance reserve fund, 400K being funded through surplus. I mean, I can make that decision tonight. Were there any other warrant articles?
The CBA,
CTE
CTE, whatever the
And-
newest
and-
numbers are.
and the
you know,
CBA.
the.
Yeah, the,
Nurses one.
yeah,
Yeah.
The CBA is peanut stuff.
it's small, yeah, so that one, and I think it has to still have some ratification to go through first. But by the 16th, we should have it.
Yeah, I think, speaking for myself, I'm in agreement with you, Charlie. I think that
Me too.
all of the other articles, I think we can. Well, I guess we'll poll.
I know I got 1.2 million to play with. Okay, because that's in the retained unassigned fund.
Correct.
Got 1.2 million there. So if I have a surplus of 5, all right, that covers my warrant article, and I still got 1 million left to worry about how we're gonna use it. So, excuse me, said I, just,
No. I understand.
so I feel it's pretty safe funding the warrant article with those surplus. Carrie?
And again, I think if the point is, if there isn't that surplus there, then they don't get funded.
Well, yes,
We're
they
not
do.
gonna, we're.
Yes, they do. They get funded out of 1.2 million too.
Yeah,
Right. Got it. The unassigned fund balance.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, all right, yeah. Agreed.
So we don't have a proposed warrant articles written up yet, right? We didn't see, I just looked at it and see anything.
no.
I have, I drafted some, I just estimated.
Mhm.
If you want me to send it to you.
Yeah. Sure. This
So
for a
there's
second.
4, CTE, JREA, maintenance fund, and the trust, and the education trust fund. That a trust fund? All of them?
Five, right?
Well, plus,
Budget,
plus the budget.
oh, yeah,
Actually, 6, plus the
6.
elections.
Plus the
yeah.
elections, yeah.
Mhm. My brain is fried.
Mine too. That's the end of the budget. Oh, I could just step on a peanuts.
Charlie, thank you for putting all your time in.
Yeah.
It's worth it if we can get what we need.
You sent that, oh, you have just did, okay, thank you. Let me also see if I have something else here real fast.
So keep in mind, we're looking at these, I didn't have numbers, so I just, on some of them, just threw some in or put X's in. In addition, the bond warrant article has to be reviewed by legal counsel, and you and I need to have a conference call with him, so the wording could change. Will likely change.
Okay.
So we
I
should,
have
wait-
some,
Okay.
so should we wait till the 15th to look at those? Will they be finalized by then, pretty much? Like
Ruben has them right now.
on the 15th, will they be pretty much finalized?
Six-
Or by the 15th?
They
16th.
extend if I get that number, yes.
We don't wanna wait till then?
I like that you're thinking out of the box.
but here are some of Carrie's warrants, warrant articles. So Article 2. We have to obviously change some language and so forth. But this is the latest information and is gonna be the last information we get from the architects based upon numbers. There's a whole lot of explanation. I haven't read through that, but I do have the attachments. So he feels this right here. The 22,895, so closer to 23 million. Estimated state building aid. What he has for 16, a little over 16 million. And 6.849 or 85 is that number. So he feels that's the number that. After another estimator to come in.
Which should be on the bond, which we said
Which-
7 million at the meeting, so.
Yeah, so we said 7 million, so 6.849 million, it's around there. So I need to delve in before we,
Right.
finalize that number, but that's the figure he came up with. This is the warrant article information from another district that he provided as well. I think it was the Monadnock Regional School District 1. Just as for some language that he said that would be.
Yes,
fine.
probably. Thank you.
Then
Goodness
Sorry,
gracious,
Karen.
thank you.
this is Article 3. I mean, that's pretty standard, same article every single year. And it's just whatever numbers we put in there. Article 4. Collective bargaining agreement because it's impacting 2 more years of it. Estimated, first year right off the bat, 30,000, second year probably closer to like 6. But we still have to, we haven't talked about that.
On CTE, this is related to,
That's the negotiation conversation.
okay,
CTE was.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So that's the negotiation then, okay.
Yeah, and then we go to,
He said those numbers are gonna be relatively small.
they're not gonna be. They won't even be the number for the special ed trust fund. I think.
Yep, okay.
Carrie and I still have to go through that final stuff, but. Here we go, these right here. Special ed contingency fund. I think you saw talk about 50,000. And then the last one was the building maintenance fund. And from the fund balance, yep, so it's written that way, and I think you said 400, was it? Yeah. So Article 6 and Article 7 would be ones. And that language should be pretty. That's standard language that we've had before. Just the numbers, so you could say, you can make some judgments on those two.
Yeah, I think Charlie, these are the ones, right, that you finance committee agreed to and presented, right? So as far as those are the amounts, right?
Finance committee did not address one article.
We talked about them, but we did not.
We didn't have a
Decisions.
review of one article.
The facilities committee talks about some warrant articles. as
The
well,
facilities
and
committee
That
came-
was the
All right,
number
got it.
400 or 500.
Yeah,
came
yeah.
From that.
Okay. That came from something. And the special ed contingency is something we just,
Somehow would like to get some kind of a mini capital improvements list in there.
You will get them. By the next school board meeting. So, next plan.
I have my age here up, turned up, and I hear everything that you do.
Yeah.
Quit your moving over there.
Thank you for these. We're not voting on these tonight, right?
I don't think so.
no, but I think
Okay.
what I'd like to do is just kind of like narrow the focus of our kind of scope, right? We have a whole bunch to get done between now and presumably our next meeting. I think that like. Looking at this, I'm looking around the room and not seeing much objection to any of the other articles beside the budget, so it'd be nice to kind of. Even if we're not officially approving them right now. Give people a chance to say if they have any issues with. Either the. CTE bond item, the special ed fund, or the capital maintenance fund that's been recommended by our committee, so I certainly don't. I kind of like, for the purposes of our meeting time, like to continue to focus on the overall budget item. But at least we can say we made some progress and kind of move these ones to the side. Anybody have any issues with those other items? So that leaves and we'll continue to talk about them, right? We're not approving them, just trying to. I don't want to spend all the time on the budget item and then come to figure out we have 6 more items to discuss. I think it really is down to just the budget item. So going forward, our next meeting is the 16th. Do we need to meet before that? I guess I'm looking to you guys, or based on previous experience, or provide some additional data to you, Ruben. What are you looking for in order to, you feel like you have enough direction right now, or do you feel like you need some more direction from the board?
I think that, I think I need more direction. I mean, obviously, if the board, has a number in mind, or at least a couple different scenarios that we could try to, give you what that would mean, that would be helpful. If you're saying go, 2 million below default, it's up 2 million, you want that? I mean, I can tell you what that does mean to a degree, but we could get creative in some other areas. You're talking about 500,000 below default, that's another scenario perhaps. If you're talking about even with default, that's a different scenario. Some of it involves what are trends, what is the risk that we can take. We do have that unassigned fund balance retention, is that something that we consider in this whole conversation?
I mean, I think I've got to eliminate that $950 increase that Charlie was referring to. But I think also, we can't cut ourselves off at the knees. There's got to be something. I mean, this is my view. There's got to be some increase so that we don't have to go $2 million below our default. And, I think we need to sell it. We need to sell it to our people that we are improving our educational output. That we're working on a multi-year, 9-year, 10-year plan, a strategic vision, and we're making progress. And I think as part of our communication, we need to hold up the New Hampshire school funding model to the light of day. And again, not to make judgments, but just, hey, things are going up because this is the way we fund small communities and big communities, and communities with a lot of property valuation and communities with not a lot of property valuation.
And adequacy, the concept of what they have for adequacy has not increased at all, even close to the rate at which everything has increased. It's
I think what I've tried to explain to people is even if we kept a relatively flat budget, taxes,
yes,
do go up because the state aid is just not there anymore. Or it could depend on the valuation between the two towns, right? That changes too.
We still have a lot of other comparisons to make around here. I mean, I feel bad, but Conval is going through a lot of difficulties financially and otherwise. And I think that, some of it is maybe good planning, some of it is maybe good fortune, but I think we need to hold up how things are going here compared to some of the struggles going on in other parts of the region.
One of the things that should be held up is our health insurance increase is so incredibly minimal compared to everybody else's. It's extraordinary, what districts are having to go through. And ours, because of the plans made a couple years ago, there's an increase, but nothing compared to what some districts are having to sacrifice to be able to pay for it.
Well, in year after year, so the compounding of that but it's going up.
Yeah.
And it's a number that we haven't seen for a while.
But that's an extraordinary thing.
It's the raise in that overall in district is the amount of money that is, above default in a sense. Now, some of it's in the default, so that's not quite the right way to say it.
That's right, that's a big chunk, isn't it? That
Well,
12%.
if you throw all your health insurance and dental insurance together and then subtract the $130,000 of revenue, that number is roughly what you're increasing above the default, even though, again, like, it's not perfect because some of that money is in default. But that's kind of explains how much we're talking about. That's a big number that we haven't had for a while, but it's still significantly less, half to a third of what some other places are experiencing. Yes, that's true. So again, it's the message. Yeah, things are getting expensive. It could be worse, in that sense as well. That's not a heartwarming conversation to have, but it is true.
And we're gonna make it sound heartwarming.
But if you give me some scenarios, I can obviously put some scenarios together if you'd like me to do that. As to what I think it would be. We could look at all the options I've heard.
I am not comfortable defending to the towns a lower than default budget. I think that is a very slippery slope. I don't see it defendable, and so if you wouldn't mind putting a scenario together to match the default, I would like to see that. And if they decide to cut things, then we'll have to figure that out. But I think that would be a real disservice to our position to start off saying, well, nope, let's cut $1 million off the default. I don't see that's a viable or practical thing for the board to do. But if you could put something together, that's still cutting a lot of money, and I really respect the amount of time, you guys have put into this. I just don't know how we would go to the taxpayers with the proposed.
To me, I think the important part of that scenario is, again, keeping the scheduled pay increases for SAU personnel, like keeping the staff and the people that are critical to the operation at the center, right? We certainly want to propose a default budget, and we want to make sure the principals and administrators are also properly rewarded for the work that they're doing. I think Lisa, you probably agree with that. I think is what we're looking at. Any other scenarios that people want to give for direction to Ruben? Charlie, do you have a number in mind? You just need to say it, like, just be direct and say it, and we'll move on. If it's the number that is on your sheet, then.
No, I don't have a number.
What do you propose then?
What do I propose? I'm
Yeah.
gonna wait and find out what Newman comes back with. I mean, I've done some outside the box thinking. I'm trying to figure out how to do two impossible tasks at the same time, right? And I don't want to go to default route because the default only accounts for those things that we have to have. Not that we need to have, all right? The things we have to have by law, not the things we need to have to accomplish our task of educating our children. Right? So I don't want to mess with the default budget. What I want to do is look at what are we really going to spend this year? Okay. How much more do we need for next year to do what we need to do? And then what's that amount to? And if it's exactly the same, then it's exactly the same. I don't think it is, but if it's exactly the same, it is.
So based on the work that you did there, the revised operating budget is, you have 33,695.
Yeah, that was based on a 1.2 mil surplus. That's a revised one?
Yep.
Yeah, that's based on a 1.2 mil surplus.
Yep.
If you have a 998 surplus, it's something more than that. If you have a 750 surplus, it's something. So somebody has to guesstimate what, with some degree of accuracy, what the surplus is gonna be.
I love that concept of guesstimating with some degree of accuracy. It can be done, but it sure does feel like voodoo sometimes.
Businesses do that all the time. We reforecast every quarter and we take a look at what the future is gonna be and then we make changes. And it can affect our prices, can affect our costs, can affect lots of things, but I mean, any financial, I'm sure Kerry does it too. You forecast things frequently because you know that what you're looking at expenses that are what, 18 months out? You're gonna use all of your experience, and it's an art, believe me, to use all of your experience to come up with a forecast. And then you have to adjust that as reality comes into play. You gotta drive a stake in the ground someplace.
Yep.
Or
So-
like I used to present my budget, and my boss would say, I want everything on your list, but I want it for 10% less. And so I would have to go figure out how to give him everything on the list for 10% less.
That was tough the first year.
Yeah.
It's on one of my.
You know one
spreadsheets.
thing,
Well,
bigger the budget
three,
gets,
four, three,
like
four
we
and a
have.
half. Rows. Okay. So I think,
So.
to me,
so
we have like
basically,
a ceiling
six-
and a floor.
It looks like there's from the proposed. We want, basically, this is estimated. What would happen if we removed 600,000? What would happen if we removed 1.2 million? So like. In increments of 600,000, which is roughly remove 2%. Ish, and remove 4%.
That's what I'm hearing.
Bring those scenarios back. And that will be from the proposed. And the proposed, both of those percentages get below the default by, so then you can hover around like, oh, well, let's add the 50,000 back or whatever. It's kind of,
Thank you for doing that extra. work.
yep, so 2%, 4% from there. That's what we'll look for. That's based upon what you've talked about and what Charlie's talked
Yep.
about.
Well, if you have 600K surplus. All right, you're gonna reduce your budget by 600K. And the way you're gonna do that is take 1% or whatever it is off every line item. Because we're not gonna eliminate any services or people or anything like that.
Mhm.
Because we're basing on the service the surplus to fill that in. So what we would be doing is just playing a numbers game. Reducing the budget, knowing full well, we're gonna have surplus to cover the expense.
Okay. Is that okay?
I think we have some
Yep.
direction there and plan on, hopefully, I think we'll have to finalize this at our next meeting on the 16th.
16th, yep. And that's information to you in advance to have conversations.
That would be good.
All right.
All right.
And so for the policies, fourth reading, that's gonna be on the,
No, we're gonna do them tonight, John. Just to browbeat you.
Fourth reading.
While we're getting the policies up, policy committee, are we good to meet this Thursday at 4:30? That's our scheduled meeting. Thursday at 4:30.
I'm trying, let me see, Thursday, this one, the 5th. Oh, wait, wrong one. Yeah. Yep. I can do that.
So you have a quorum, even if I don't show up.
Okay. All right, so what I'd like to do is open up the actual DAF, please. And what I'd like to do is ask us to vote for these as a group. These are all required by law, but I have a couple of brief notes on each of them. If you could scroll down to the part that says, keep going. Keep going. And right there. Just stay there for a second. You don't have to read that. I just want to show the notes. On DAF, the language that I would like to have is, as you go down, you'll see spots that say superintendents and or office and all this and highlighted in yellow. All of those I'd like to read, Wendy, as superintendent or designee, or and or designee. So anytime you see that in any of the policies, I'd like that edit. DAF includes total of tons of different additional little pieces to it. And where was it? Number 14. Okay, so that was on page 7 as the superintendent officer. All right, this includes
Which page?
let me get the page number. Oh, page 14. Can you go to page 14? I'm sorry. Okay, I just want you to notice that
I don't have page.
DAF includes,
The five.
this is about how we spend our money and who we can contract with, and it affects those kind of things. So on page 14, there is contractor language about who we can hire, bidding, all that. So that's something that not that it's particularly brand new, but there is updated language. So as we're looking specifically at the CTE or major facilities, this definitely will need to be read through to make sure that we're following all of their procedures of how we do the bidding and who we partner with and how we make sure that they are legally able to do it and not under investigation. All of that's written in here. The other thing written in here is in food servicing, Again, I think it was on around page 14, there's something called the Buy American Act. And there's some specific requirements on how we order food. And that would definitely also need to be read through, because I think there's literally like a percentage of our products that have to be American made. This is an interesting thing. On that E that's highlighted, I am gonna recommend requiring suppliers to provide specific information about percentage of US content in food products. I'm gonna recommend we add the optional from, instead of from time to time, I'd like to add the word periodically. I think that that's too vague as it is and needs a term like that. So that's the recommendation is on E to add the word periodically. Okay. And if we go to page 15, where are we now? You show your pages, it's on your screen, yeah. 14, so it's 14, then 15. It's saying that we need to have on C, inventory, just as a note, no less than once every 2 years, the superintendent or designee shall cause a physical inventory of all equipment and pilferable items to be taken. So every 2 years, we need to do an inventory. Okay, so those are just notes that I wanted you guys to see. All right. Any questions on DAF? I know you've all read this for a
Inventory of.
Huh?
Equipment.
Pens
Yes.
and pencils.
Oh, and of what's in,
Tangible personal
Items
property.
purchased
with federal funds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. On to EBCH, again, superintendent or designee. This one has just a note, it's a biennial review.
What page?
I'm sorry, we're on to the next policy, EBCH. Okay, this is the chemical hygiene plan. Biennial review. And there is a sample plan attached to this, if you could open that up, which is the different policy. Yep, so go to the sample plan, it's actually titled that. And this was prepared by Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, so they're offering this as an option. It's mandatory now that we have this plan. I'm not sure what we have in place now, but if we don't have anything, this is a sample. It's long. And it requires a 2-year review. I would like to suggest the board include with their approval a date that this sample plan become created. So I don't just want the policy to kind of sit. I think this is too valuable, especially in light of Ed 306 passing, which cleared out many requirements for chemical hygiene. The edits so this would have to be edited to update to our school district. But what I'd love to do is have, before, this is a sample plan, we don't approve this plan. We approve the policy. And that sends it to Sandy and Ruben and others to create the plan. This is just a sample of it. But I would like the board to say, we would like a plan to be in place by February 1st or something like that. Whatever's a reasonable time to be able to come back with a plan for us.
And what's this gonna cost us?
What's this gonna cost?
Yeah.
I don't know. That can be part of the,
I mean, we gotta pay somebody a stipend or something, to be a chemical officer.
well, one change in this, it's
Yeah,
an
we do
interesting
already.
question. Because,
Art, we had several years back. Had some feedback from some visits that we needed to do some things with our chemical storage and so forth, and so that's all been done and it's maintained continuously. And so one of our teachers is in charge of all the chemical, making sure that the chemical requirements are up to speed and so forth. So we might even have something of this nature already
sure
in
there must
place.
be something.
It's certainly a checklist in the process. Years,
yeah, per OSHA, there must be things.
yeah, but
One thing about.
Depends
this-
whether this is laboratory chemicals, correct? Like
No.
science,
I don't think so. Thought it was custodial as well. No, it's just
that was
custodial.
different. Because I thought it was laboratory.
No, this is not
This is
laboratory.
laboratory.
No. One thing with this is that,
Okay.
people, employees can no longer bring their own cleaning supplies. As part of this. So, yeah, maybe there will be a cost because people like to bring their own stuff in.
Would Sandy be able to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should probably grab the microphone, Sandy.
Oops.
Sorry.
I just want to let you know that the science educators do have a plan in place that is being followed very closely. I will say that I don't believe that the facilities department has one in place. It has been a concern of mine, so it is on our radar to look at for sure.
Just read I'm gonna read the. Yeah, in the summary, it says. NHSBA created this new sample policy to satisfy a requirement in NH Ed 320.02 B3 that districts have a policy to minimize the use of toxic chemicals and provisions prohibiting employees from bringing their own cleaning projects or pesticides into school buildings. And B, to include information regarding the requirement under this policy, under this restriction that districts create a chemical hygiene plan with elements as described in that section. And then they have a template. So yeah, this is all inclusive. All right. So Sandy, do you think February 1st is an unreasonable time frame to create that plan?
No.
Cool.
What-
Then,
what you-
not as a requirement, you can come back and say, we
Yeah.
couldn't get it done in time, but.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think we can definitely be
31.
working on it, but I don't want to say that anything can be solidified by that time.
Okay.
This is very important piece of what we should be doing. And I have looked through this sample plan. It is very inclusive, but it needs to be because of the safety purposes of it. So in regards to how much stuff is involved in this, it is going to take quite a while to get everything in line. So, you know, Ruben, you were saying maybe in April. Goal is probably more reasonable. I mean, I don't mind starting to work on this. I just don't want to make promises.
February is a completely reasonable date. There's just so much going on.
Yeah.
And I know exactly especially within the budget cycle and so forth, and if things go fast.
So April 1st, come back, doesn't have to be a firm, but here's a draft of what we're looking at. Sound good?
Sure. Thank you.
EHR. As we're going through, there is a copy fee of number 8. Where are you? Hang on, get my policies back up. My whole system left me. So there's a piece that we already talked to Wendy about, the removing in EHR this is for public records, photocopying and a fee for it. And I think we've talked about it. There's a section that's just not necessary and they recommend getting rid of it if we don't make that. So keep going down one more.
Copy fees.
Yeah, so yeah, the copy fees. I don't know, do we do copy fees now? I don't know, but we can leave that in and
Yeah.
just,
If we're talking about right to know,
yeah,
we ask them, first of all, we
should
do
find
not
out.
give digital information. There's reasons for that. So they have to come to the school district
Mhm.
and they can pay, we usually do 25 cents per copy. Could be 10, it can be 10 cents per copy, but we always charge something. Obviously, people can come in and then take a look at it and then take their own pictures if they want to of the documents, that's their right to do so. But
Okay, so then my recommendation will be in 6 to remove the statement that says electronic records may be provided. So Wendy, you got that one? And then let's go down to number 8. And this whole section is optional and it's just costs for digital communications, so we're gonna remove 8 as well. All right, on to IHAM, we're zooming people. Health education exemption. Just a note on this. This is something that we follow now. It gives a little more detail. But for parents who are submitting forms for, let me just read it out. For health education exemptions, those forms need to be submitted annually. So that's just a note. I don't know who would know that, but that was just an interesting piece I saw. In IKF, we're approving is in high school graduation requirements, they made a change. For the last couple of years, they included the FAFSA application as a mandatory high school graduation requirement. They've now removed that requirement.
Yeah.
Now we need to give the information about it. But another piece of this that I guess I heard about, but it also says that it's mandatory that we have a local or state assessment of national and state history. So I know that we do kind of that stuff, but it was just like, oh, for graduation, you have to have a documented assessment of national and state.
Yeah, it's just history, yeah.
Hugely used. All right. Almost done. JLCJA. Emergency plan for sports related injuries. This includes information about AEDs and CPR. And who can administer. And I believe what we found was there wasn't actually an action plan in place. That this is a mandatory, this is a requirement now, but that we actually don't have this policy. We have different kinds of plans, we just don't have this plan. So this is new that we definitely want Heather and everybody to kind of really make sure that they've all looked at. But additional written protocols. So yeah, we didn't have this policy. So now we will need to. Has lots of information and includes an annual review. Okay. JLF, we're getting closer to the end, people. Reporting child abuse and neglect. The one change in this one that I saw, it's intended to improve reporting and record requirements and provide a mandate for annual training, which we all knew was there through the RSA. One piece of this that is new is, please scroll down to number 3. Go up, too far, up. Sorry. Keep going, not that 3. Yeah, keep going. All right, A3, can you scroll down just a little, right there? All right, number 3, required reporting mode for school employees, volunteers, and contract service providers. Now school employees cannot report anonymously, which is a change. And we talked about that in our meeting with Jen. So a school employee can only choose A or B, and as you choose B, which is disclosure not allowed, it's your information, your personal information is redacted in official paperwork, but if there goes to prosecution, all of that becomes public record.
Mhm.
So that was just an interesting note that we wanted people to hear about, okay? And last one, KFD is about similar to the sports-related injuries, use and location of AEDs. The only note that I put down there is that AEDs have to be registered, which was news to me too, things I didn't know, but that was the only note that like, oh, that was interesting. So I would like to make a motion to approve all of the listed policies with the amendments of the minor language.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sandy. Any questions or comments?
No,
No, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the policies listed with the amendments made by Lisa, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
aye,
All those opposed? Abstentions? So that passes by a vote of 5-0.
thanks, for all your,
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
attention to details.
Board committee updates?
I don't
No-
think so. I
No
can't
facilities
remember.
committee update
No.
today.
I'm not gonna push too hard on that one.
Thanks.
I didn't have any discussion items. Budget, obviously, a major discussion item, so we'll open up for the second session of public comments.
Is there anybody left? Wow, good for them sticking it out.
Put their snoring on speaker.
Have a. Could be. Someone asked.
So again, for those online, if you have a public comment, please raise your hands. There, we will. Go to board matters. Didn't have any board matters for tonight, so we're on to the last item.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, John. All those in favor of adjournment, please make it by saying aye.
aye.
I heard you breathe.
That is 5. Approved. And we're adjourned. Thank you.